Hey everyone, I'm Allison Mars. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening.
We're at a point in this epidemic, this pandemic, where individuals' choice not to get vaccinated is now impacting the rest of us.
Masks back on. The CDC recommending fully vaccinated people wear masks inside again in areas with high transmission rates as more states crack down on the unvaccinated.
I, too, was being crushed by the rioters. I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die, defending this entrance.
Raw, emotional, and powerful testimony at the January 6th Select Committee's first hearing. What else the officers attacked at the Capitol are saying about that day. Masks are back, even if you're vaccinated. The Biden administration out with new indoor mask guidance today. New data is suggesting that vaccinated people could be carrying higher levels of the coronavirus than we first thought.
Today, they're changing their guidance. They're changing their advice to the American public, their public health advice, based on evolving data and an evolving historical guidance. That virus. That's exactly what they should be doing.
NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece is outside the White House for us. Shannon, what is the new guidance from the administration? Who should be wearing a mask and when should they be wearing it?
So the CDC is saying that even if you are vaccinated, if you live in an area with high community spread, and that right now includes a lot of areas in the South and Midwest, you should be wearing a mask. And they say that this recommendation, which is a reverse of course, is based off of new data that shows this Delta variant that is now the predominant strain of the virus in the U.S., that people, even vaccinated people infected with the Delta variant, have such a high viral load that they're able to spread the virus to unvaccinated people and potentially other vaccinated people. There was a belief previously that if you were vaccinated, the odds were really, really low that you could spread the virus. Now they're saying the vaccinated can spread the virus. And here's a little bit more of what Press Secretary Jen Psaki had to say earlier today about this change.
What is your message to Americans who are feeling whiplash right now? Why should they trust the same group of health officials who just 2 months ago told them they don't have to wear a mask anymore inside?
Because our goal is to save their lives. And our responsibility and the responsibility of public health officials is to continue to provide updated guidance if it warrants.
And the CDC director said that this was a decision that weighed very heavily on her. This data weighed heavily on her. She is not taking this decision lightly, but felt it was something that the agency had to come out and do given the new data that they've seen.
So it's not just masking. The White House is stepping up its efforts to get more Americans vaccinated. What else are they doing, Shannon?
Yeah, ultimately, the CDC director said the long-term solution to all this isn't masks, it's vaccines. And if they can get more people vaccinated, that's going to lower the amount of virus spreading in the community and lower the risks for everyone. So they continue to try and get the vaccine out to more people in the community. They've been stuck at around 500,000 shots a day. The rate's kind of plateaued for a while, but they're going to put more money out there for community programs, for mobile vaccination centers, to make the vaccine more accessible. And of course, to try and message out there to people, encouraging them to get the vaccine and trying to knock down some of the false information out there around the vaccine.
All right, Shannon Pettypiece at the White House. Thanks so much.
California is committed to vaccination, verification, and or testing on a weekly basis.
The Golden State cracking down on COVID infections starting in August, which is just next week. California will require that all state employees and healthcare workers show proof they're vaccinated or get tested weekly. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas is in Los Angeles. Guad, this new requirement affects hundreds of thousands of people in the state. So what else should we know about it?
Allison, that is correct. 246,000 state employees in the state of California. Governor Newsom speaking about this change yesterday. You know, they're trying to do everything they can to try to convince people to go get the vaccine. According to the governor, the latest number is that 25% of those eligible to get the vaccine in California are still not vaccinated. And one of the things that has been highlighted with this change is the fact that California has this digital database, which they're going to be using to check who has gotten the vaccine. We spoke to someone from Human Resources at the state level who mentioned how effective the system will be for them to check who's gotten the vaccine.
If we can implement a vaccine verification system, we certainly think that other employers can, and we know that other employers have already as well. I think it is realistic to implement a vaccine verification system, especially with the digital record being fairly easy to access.
So up until now in California, we've been using the honor system, right? The governor did mention that this system would also eventually perhaps be available for private businesses that would like to use it. So for now, we're going to see this change at the state level. And they do hope that city governments and also county officials go with this change, and they also require their employees to prove that they've been vaccinated. Otherwise, they would have to get tested once or twice a week for those working in a very dangerous settings, and also to wear a mask when at work.
Guad, Newsom says these rules will help the state get ahead of the curve before things get even worse. So what does California's vaccination rate look like today? What's the latest on COVID cases, hospitalizations in the state? How are they doing on all of those fronts?
Right. So one of the things the governor said is they do predict an increase in hospitalizations. And we know that the Delta variant is really what's changed things in California. The governor has said that the spread of the virus is largely driven by those unvaccinated. You know, he gave the number 25% of Californians that can get the vaccine have chosen not to do it. So here in California, the state has constantly tried to motivate people to come out and get the vaccine. They had the lottery. We keep repeating this. They had a lottery where they gave away millions of dollars. They now have other incentives like gift cards and whatever they can to try to convince the remaining part of the population that is eligible to come out and get the vaccine.
All right, Guad Venegas in LA. Thank you. It is time to check in with NBC News Now correspondent Simone Boyce. She has the headlines from NBCnews.com. What's up, Simone?
Hey, Allison. Well, today we start with shocking video out of New York City. A security camera capturing the moment an underground explosion erupted through a sidewalk grate, knocking a 57-year-old man to the ground. The victim suffered second-degree burns and is recovering at the hospital. The cause of that explosion is now under investigation. And former U.S. Senator Mike Enzi has died. The 77-year-old from Wyoming had been hospitalized with a broken neck and broken ribs after a bicycle accident late last week. Officials said there is no indication anyone else was involved in the accident. The Republican senator retired in January after serving 4 terms. And in Germany, a chemical explosion left at least one person dead and several others missing. The blast at a waste management facility near Cologne, sparking a massive fire that took firefighters almost 4 hours to put out. Dozens of injuries reported there, with officials saying that there does not appear to be danger in the air quality as of right now, and no word yet on the cause of that explosion. Well, North and South Korea taking a big step towards improving relations. Both countries on Tuesday restoring communication channels between the two nations that had been suspended for nearly 14 months. Both Pyongyang and Seoul agreeing to resume speaking regularly and work towards reconciliation, despite a 2-year stalemate in U.S.-led nuclear talks. And Instagram is launching enhanced security measures for teenagers. So anyone under 18 years old who joins the social platform will now default to a private profile. The company says it has also developed a tool that will detect suspicious adult accounts and stop them from interacting with teenage users. The company had already restricted adults from sending direct messages to users under 18 who don't follow them. But man, seems like a lot of those guidelines should have already been in place by now. Allison, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, maybe we should have started with those, but glad they're here nonetheless. Simone, thanks so much. 4 officers attacked at the Capitol, sharing absolutely haunting testimony today in the first hearing of the January 6th Select Committee. Just a warning, some of the language you're going to hear is disturbing.
When I was 25 years old and then a sergeant in the Army, I had deployed to Iraq for Operation Iraqi Freedom. From time to time, I volunteered to travel on IED-infested roads. But on January 6th, for the first time, I was more afraid to work at the Capitol than my entire deployment to Iraq.
I was grabbed, beaten, tased, all while being called a traitor to my country. I was at risk of being stripped of and killed with my own firearm as I heard chants of kill him with his own gun.
To my perpetual confusion, I saw the thin blue line flag, a symbol of support for law enforcement, more than once being carried by the terrorists as they ignored our commands and continued to assault us.
One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo!" No one had ever called me a while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer. More than 6 months later, January 6th still isn't over for me. I've had to avail myself of multiple counseling sessions from the Capitol Police Employee Assistance Program, and I'm now receiving private counseling therapy for the persistent emotional trauma of that day. I've also participated in many peer support programs with fellow law enforcement officers from around the United States. I know so many other officers continue to hurt, both physically and emotionally.
NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor is on Capitol Hill. Sahil, Officer Michael Fanone told the committee that January 6th was unlike anything he had ever seen. We heard some unbelievably disturbing testimony just there. What did he say about the lawmakers who are downplaying what happened on that day?
Yeah, Allison, extraordinary and powerful testimony, as you just played there from those four officers. One of the themes of this hearing was the lawmakers as well as the police officers countering claims, fabrications, lies, and conspiracy theories about what really happened on that day. Nobody can tell those police officers they did not experience what they experienced and what they went through. Many of them still have the scars, physical and otherwise, to show for it. And one of the officers, as you just mentioned, Michael Fanone, pushed back strenuously on those lawmakers in Congress and their allies who have compared and downplayed that January 6th attack to things like a tourist visit or something that wasn't quite as dangerous as it was. Let's play some of what Michael Fanone said.
The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful. My law enforcement career prepared me to cope with some of the aspects of this experience. Being an officer, you know your life is at risk whenever you walk out the door, even if you don't expect otherwise law-abiding citizens to take up arms against you. But nothing, truly nothing, has prepared me to address those elected members of our government who continue to deny the events of that day, and in doing so, betray their oath of office.
And he didn't say the word there, Allison, but all those members of Congress that he's talking about are Republicans. Fanone made abundantly clear that political affiliation and ideology has nothing to do with the way he does his job. He doesn't think about it. He doesn't talk about it. But on this one, it was impossible to ignore that fact.
Sahil, I know some of our colleagues were in that room today. What have you been hearing from them? I mean, just watching it on TV, you can feel the weight of the testimony. You could see people in the room kind of sitting up at attention when Fanone hit the table. What else are you hearing about what it was like to be in there today?
Yeah, my colleagues Garrett Hake and Leanne Caldwell were in that room during the testimony. They describe it as a serious and somber tone throughout. They said members in that room were enraptured by the testimony of those police officers. And one Democratic congressman who is not on the committee but has become close to some of the police officers, Eric Swalwell, was sitting in the room while all of this happened. There was also quite a bit of note-taking among the members. Of course, they have to figure out where all of this goes next on the basis of what they just heard.
Yeah, so Sahil, to that end, what is next for this committee? I know they only have until Friday before the House leaves on recess. So what are the hopes? They start with the hearing today. What are they trying to accomplish in the days and weeks ahead?
Unclear at this moment what exactly is next for this committee, Allison. As you mentioned, the House is expected to go on recess at the end of this week for 7 long weeks. Now, it is possible, the chair of this committee, Benny Thompson, has kept open the possibility that members of this committee will return to Washington to continue to do their work, but nothing has been scheduled yet. What they do next remains up to those 9 members, those 7 Democratic lawmakers and those 2 Republicans who spoke powerfully today as well, Allison.
All right, Sahil, incredibly moving testimony today. Thank you so much for the recap. We really appreciate it. As we've been saying, the January 6th Select Committee gavelled in its very first hearing today, nearly 7 months after the Capitol riots, running into plenty of political roadblocks along the way. NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett shows us how we finally got here.
The power in numbers. We came here to protect our republic. Let's make it worth it. March on Congress directly after Trump's speech. March on Congress.
These images burned into our brains for months. They spurred partisan reaction and arguments on how to properly investigate what happened. It started with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who originally supported an investigation immediately following the attack.
Last week's violent attack on the Capitol was undemocratic, un-American, and criminal. And the president's immediate action also deserves congressional action, which is why I think a fact-finding commission and a censure resolution would be prudent.
Democrats agreed, with Speaker Nancy Pelosi calling for a 9/11-style commission in February, but McCarthy disagreed with her approach.
Speaker Pelosi is doing it all wrong. First, it's not bipartisan, 7-4. Secondly, they don't allow subpoena power for the minority and the majority to work together. Mine was very clear, 3 simple things. It has to be equal, 50-50, Republican, Democrat appointed. It has to be equal, just like on 9/11, the power of subpoenas, of which way we go.
Pelosi introduced her draft proposal for a commission to investigate in March, calling for seats to be shaped by President Biden and the majority and minority leaders of the House and Senate. And while Democrats wanted to focus on the, quote, influencing factors behind the attack and security measures in place, Republicans aimed to introduce electoral reform and new legislation to, quote, promote voter confidence. Democrats offered some concessions in April, splitting the panel evenly between Democrats and Republicans and changing the way subpoenas would be issued. A joint effort in May by Republican Representative John Katko and Democratic Representative Benny Thompson included these changes, but was denounced by both McCarthy and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell.
After careful consideration, I've made the decision to oppose the House Democrats' slanted and unbalanced proposal for another commission to study the events of January the 6th.
Pelosi and Democrats floated the prospect of an internal select committee, but Pelosi emphasized she wanted to avoid that, as an outside commission would be made up of people outside Congress.
We wanted the American people to have the fullest confidence in the product that there is.
The Thompson-Katko deal was blocked by Senate Republicans in their first filibuster of the Biden era. So Pelosi created a select committee with a panel of 8 Democratic appointees and 5 Republicans, where she had veto power over members McCarthy appointed. The first Republican picked, Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney.
My oath, my duty, all of our oaths and our duty is to the Constitution, and that will always be above politics.
Pelosi then blocked 2 of McCarthy's picks, Representatives Jim Banks of Indiana and Jim Jordan of Ohio, both who are staunch defenders of the former president and voted against certifying the 2020 election results.
Pelosi has broken this institution, made it undeniable this panel has lost all legitimacy. Pelosi has created a sham process. Unless Speaker Pelosi reverses course and seats all 5 Republicans, we will not participate.
Even though it was something that was bipartisan and yielded on many points to the Republicans, in order to achieve bipartisanship, the leadership of the Republican Party in the House opposed and whipped against the bipartisan commission.
But in a last-minute ad over the weekend, Republican Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois will also join the commission, serving as just one of 2 Republicans on the 9-person panel.
Some Republicans have been saying that the GOP should play ball on this committee. You could get the three.
Who was that? Adam and Liz?
Well,
aren't they kind of like Pelosi Republicans?
While McCarthy maintains Republicans will move forward with their own investigation.
The Biden administration tightening the rules on toxic wastewater from coal-fired power plants, reversing another Trump-era policy. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joining me now. So, Josh, let's get into the specifics. What does the Biden administration want to change here?
Well, we're talking about some pretty serious heavy metals here, Allison, including arsenic, lead, as well as mercury, things you really don't want in your drinking water. Now, the Trump administration had eased those regulations for essentially the wastewater that's created when you have a fossil fuel burning power plant, like a coal plant. It burns that fuel to power a steam engine that creates that steam for a turbine that generates electricity. You end up with all of this polluted wastewater. And now what the Biden administration is doing is they want to bring back the stricter rules that they had, which require those power plants to actually use the very latest, most modern technology available to try to sift out those heavy metals before they get into drinking water that can end up going downstream and getting into all kinds of places they shouldn't be.
So, Josh, the Trump White House claimed that their looser standards would actually reduce pollution because plant owners would voluntarily participate in an incentive program. What happened under that program?
Well, it depends on who you ask, but in general, there hasn't been a lot of success in asking industry to voluntarily comply with things that are stricter than what the law absolutely says they must do. And in the case of this rule, we actually saw 24 coal-fired power plants just in this year alone try to lock in permits before anything might change under Biden that would allow them to pollute according to the more lenient rules. And one of those, the Cumberland fossil plant in Tennessee, one of the largest coal burning power plants still in the United States, was able to secure an exemption themselves to be able to use these more lenient rules. And so, according to a lot of the climate and environmental activists, that was not a strategy that worked very well.
So, Josh, you'd think environmental groups would be happy about this move from the Biden administration, but some of them still aren't. Why not?
Well, they want the Biden administration to go immediately back to the Obama-era rules. The Biden administration, they're not doing that. They're essentially saying they're going to go keep the Trump rules in place while they craft these new rules, which will take several years. It really could take until the end of the Biden administration. But of course, the Biden administration, they say that that's because they could face legal challenges. That if that happened, there could actually backfire and go back to rules from the 1980s, which were way more lenient than what you see now. But still, we're hearing from the Sierra Club just today in a statement. They are not happy about this at all. And they say that now is the time to double down on policies that protect clean water for all communities, and to do so as quickly as possible, Allison.
All right, Josh Letterman, always great to see you. Thank you. It's time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. The latest headache for the airlines, a fuel shortage. Americans saying it might have to add stops to some of its flights because of fuel delivery delays. So what's going on? CNBC Airline reporter Leslie Joseph's here to answer that question for us. So, Leslie, American Airlines says it's dealing with a nationwide fuel shortage. What's causing it, and are they the only ones dealing with this?
So American is not the only airline that's dealing with this, and it's really caused by a confluence of things. One is the incredible rise in air travel that we've seen this summer. And what's happening now with these fuel shortages are actually delivery delays. They're cropping up in Western airports that have been very, very popular with travelers. They're trying to get away from cities. They're trying to get away from other people, and they're picking these outdoor destinations. There's been a very rapid rise in demand in some of these airports. The other issue there is a shortage of truck drivers to bring this fuel to the airports. We've heard about these labor shortages in various industries around the U.S., and this is one of them. And at the same time, there's competition for this fuel because a lot of aircraft are also fighting wildfires out west. So it's really those three things.
So besides adding stops to flights, what else is American doing about this?
So Americans so far, and we've heard the same thing from Delta, Alaska, and Southwest, while they're aware of the issue and they want there to be some sort of changes pretty soon to increase supplies, there haven't really been a lot of disruptions just yet. So what American has told their pilots, conserve fuel when you can, try to taxi on a single engine and do things like that. Another option that the airlines, not just American, has is what's called tankering, which is filling airplanes up with more fuel than they might need for that flight, and therefore bringing that fuel to an airport that might be short in supply. And if you'll remember, for the last year, I mean, a lot of us have not been traveling. Jet fuel demand, along with travel demand, really plunged in the pandemic. And the way the fuel contracts work is kind of based on the last 12 months. So airlines and airports do not have the same fuel supply that they might have had, or the same proportional fuel supply that they might have had for the passengers in 2019. So we're kind of dealing with all of that at once. The airlines are a little bit worried that this could worsen at certain airports. This isn't necessarily a widespread thing if this does continue. And American did tell its pilots that they expect this into August to continue.
American released a statement saying, our team continues to work around the clock to monitor the situation and minimize the impact on our customers. I mean, you said it. We're in the middle of a busy summer travel season, and I love the way you said it. People trying to get away from cities and get away from people. How could this affect the average traveler? What should people be expecting if they might be booking their first flight in a long time?
Well, a lot of patience, I would say, because airlines are not just dealing with this fuel issue. It even issue is the labor shortage. I don't know if you've tried to call a customer service line lately, but you'll be on hold for hours, or if you're lucky, you can expect a call back and do something like that. So there are those sorts of headaches. Always check with your airline. Check in on your flight, even if it's a week before, 2 weeks before your flight up until you fly, because there have been some of these last minute changes, not just because of fuel, but because of crews, a shortage of crews, weather issues. I mean, there's a host of things that can crop up in any summer, but especially this one has been a little bit more difficult because travel has bounced back a lot faster than the airlines were anticipating. So I would just continue to be in touch with your airline however you can, and be mindful that there might be some last minute changes to your flight.
All right, it might continue to be a tough summer of travel, but hey, people are getting back out there. It's a good sign. Leslie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As migrant border crossings hit their highest levels in 2 decades, the Biden administration is speeding up asylum approval and deportation. That's according to a copy of an immigration plan obtained by NBC News. NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley joining me now. So, Julia, the administration drafted a 21-point plan to deal with the surge at the border. We won't make you go through every single one of those points, but could you give us some of the headlines of what's in it and when this goes into effect?
Yeah, Allison, some of those 21 points are things that they've already proposed. For example, asking for money from Congress so that more immigrants have right to legal counsel when they do go through immigration courts. But some of these things did catch my eye, including the speeding up of asylum approvals. They want to allow immigration officers to be able to interview people right there at the border and decide, yes, this person does qualify for asylum, and then they could bypass having to wait to have their case heard in court. Right now, there's a 1.2 million case backlog in our nation's immigration courts, in large part because they were closed for a while under COVID. The other piece of this, which is getting some more pushback from groups, is trying to speed up deportations for those who don't qualify. And just last night, they actually put in place a new policy where families who come to the United States claiming asylum who do not initially qualify for asylum will have a speedier deportation process than they originally did. This follows a spike last month when the number of families crossing the border rose from 40,000 to 50,000 between May and June.
So, Julia, unqualified migrants, as you say, will be deported pretty quickly according to this plan. What are the requirements? What's the difference between someone who might get deported and someone who is qualified to stay here in the U.S.?
Well, in order to get asylum, the first thing you have to do is prove a credible fear of return to your home country. But that determination, if left to an asylum officer, can sometimes be subjective. That's what immigrant rights groups say. And they say that if these families are deported too quickly, they might not be able to exercise all their rights, like having their case heard by a judge or being able to appeal that case up to the Bureau of Immigration Appeals. They think that there's too much that could be left in the hands of very few people in making these decisions. But yes, by and large, large, what they need to show is just a fear of return.
So you're talking about the root of the issue as well. The administration also trying to help Central Americans who are considering coming to the U.S. How are they going about doing that?
That's right. And I should say it's not just a fear of return that they won't be able to make their needs be met. It's a fear that they could be subject to violence or persecution because they're part of a particular social group. But one of the things that they're doing to look into how they can address those root causes, and we know this is something that the vice president herself has taken on, is trying to work with countries, particularly in the northern triangle of Central America, to try to set up resources for immigrants to go ahead and get the information they need there rather than make the journey to the United States. So they could start, for example, applying for refugee status, try to get in line for a visa, try to find legal ways to come to the United States so that they can be very orderly processed and resettled here rather than making that journey to the United States, overwhelming the U.S. immigration system, and also perhaps not making it through, either being deported or perhaps not being one of those who makes it on that very dangerous journey.
Right. It is a tough battle here and a long process, but we've got that 21-point plan, Julia, so it looks like the administration is at least making some progress. Thank you so much.
That's right. Thank you.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.